piece comes from. But now it is completely separate from that. It becomes something more of this aesthetic, a little bit violent, but also very beautiful piece.
Right. I think, I mean, that's this idea of like the slipperiness of the bondage and the rope having this kind of dual quality, and the fact that people are now using them as, not now, for the last 20 years have been using them, that it does, that these like images sort of get woven in and out. But I think that the piece we were talking about, we're tentatively calling codex because, like a codex, it is meant to be sort of read. And
yeah, I think of it as a way to almost read
like
my
a
work.
pictograph, kind of.
It's a pictograph. I mean, you can read it in relationship to the image I described, but you could also look at it as a way of reading how I'm trying to work right now, of really twisting and abstracting these images to see if they still hold their power or if they create a new dynamic. And I think part of this is, as I mentioned, I was joking when I said therapy, but it's also true. I think because of the age I'm on the cusp of the younger generation that isn't as burdened by some of this history and pathology. They're products of the pathology, but they're not necessarily knowledgeable about that burden.
Well, I think we talked a lot, when we had our residency, we talked a lot about the idea of memory and what our, those of us that are getting a little bit out of our 20s, I talked about what it is that the next generation needs to or should sort of carry with them, and we talked a lot about the idea of slavery, of lynching, but I think since our discussions, there's this idea of minstrelsy and blackface, and I think that's a really interesting one because I don't know if you asked a lot of people if you asked them why blackface is insulting or what's so un-PC about it. I think that half of the people that we would ask wouldn't really know where that stems from. And it's interesting because it's still kind of a powerful image, but we were talking about these University of San Diego kids who had this Compton themed party, and some of them came in blackface, and the school, I was visiting, a friend of mine works in the PR department at UCSD or CSD, and the school was, the Black Student Union and the Latino student were like, there's not enough professors on campus. Like, it sort of unleashed this kind of thing. But I don't know if people really understand why these things that have, such harrowing histories around them and events, do they carry on? And I think, like with blackface, that is something that still is in entertainment, and
not literal blackface, but the sort of exaggeration and
models, in the Tyra Banks show, it's still kind of in.
Yeah, but I mean, I think blackface is not. I mean, let's just say minstrelsy. We won't even say blackface, but reality TV is minstrelsy, and it's fair game. Everybody's on those shows. It's not limited to one group or another. I mean, these people are very willing to exploit themselves and even exaggerate themselves.
Yeah.
I find that to be pretty much the same thing. It's not so much victimization as blackface minstrelsy was, because the history of blackface minstrelsy is directly related to American musical theater, where early American musical theater made these plays to mimic and ridicule slaves, or at this point, recently freed slaves. And as you remember, it was white actors dressed in blackface, and then later black actors in blackface, because the genre was just so successful. So there really was a victimization there, I think. Now it's so ingrained, I think, in entertainment that it's not one person doing it to another person. Everyone is totally complicit in this, and everyone's willing to be part of it. I mean, we were talking about celebrity rehab last night, and I don't know if you consider that minstrelsy or not, but somebody is signing away saying, you can catch me at my worst.
My
on
most
TV.
vulnerable.
I'm most vulnerable on TV,
right.
As long as I get a check and possibly get a spinoff. Right. So, I mean, people are more than willing to exploit themselves.
It's true. I think that a lot of what I've learned through your work is not, and I hope that what people will get from coming to the show and from looking at your work is that what you think is not what you think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's almost like some of the ideas that one has been told or one has learned in school that you kind of hold as, I mean, you don't really sort of critique in any way because you think that they are what they are, like slavery, bad. You know what I mean? These ideas that there's so much more nuance to the way that life is, and ideas of complicity and
well, you
pain
remember,
and pleasure.
Africans sold slaves to the Europeans.
Right.
You know, the Europeans just, you know, monopolized it and internationalized it. That was already happening in Africa with Africans against Africans.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just Africa. It's happening in every other, you know, continent.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of our nature. That's sort of what I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. Our nature is to do these things. Mm-hmm. There's a power dynamic. Everybody will, at some point, victimize somebody else. Mm-hmm. That's just what we do. We're animals that way.
Mm-hmm. Can you, since if this is sort of like a nature thing, let's project, and let's project into Afrofuturism, which is a subject that we have talked a lot about, and that kind of plays in, especially with some of the sort of more sort of constellation motifs that have that, but that's kind of filtered in and out of your work, and it certainly appears a little bit in the catalog. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that? Just give our audience here maybe a summary of what that is. And I remember you gave me that really, I think before you talk about that, one of the things that has been really great about working at an alternative art space like CAF is that it has enabled a process that isn't about like I come to your studio and select some work and then bring it, and then it sort of becomes part of the canon. But that this exhibition is really the result of multiple discussions and sort of the ideas that I bring to the table and the ideas that you bring to the table, and how that can be used for the audience and used for different things. So I say that because when we talked about Afrofuturism, you pointed me to a really great essay by Mike.
Which one? Mike?
The music critic.
Oh, Greg
Tate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, who talked a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm.
That was an aside.
Yeah, and actually I met the woman who was accredited with creating the term, Andre Nelson, a few weeks ago at my lecture at Columbia.
Oh.
She's a professor there.
Huh.
And she's from the West Coast. But Afrofuturism, as I could best describe it, is a new field of research that is not really totally defined yet, which makes it interesting. But it is influenced by the notion of looking at the African diasporic experience through the lens of science fiction. If you consider the trajectory of Africans selling Africans to Europeans, all the way through minstrelsy, all the way to Obama, this is a surreal experience. And it's not in a vacuum that just happened to black people. This happens, you know. Okay. So, another way of understanding this, instead of looking at history, which is the document of the quote-unquote winners and victors, and also his story, if you look at it through another lens once again, and try to define this through the surreality of it, maybe we have a way of looking at the past and creating a different future. Not maybe, but we definitely have it. Oh, sorry, is that my phone?
I don't think they did text back then.
Tubbs. Anyway. Okay, so Afrofuturism. That was an Afrofuturistic moment, right?
That was hugely. Yeah.
And Sanford, now I'd like to take some questions from our audience, if that's okay.
That would be fantastic.
Great. Kimberly from our Twitter page.
Education budget cuts are becoming increasingly threatening to the arts. As an artist, why do you feel that art education and university art programs are important?
Or are they?
Art education and university programs.
We should say that Sanford is a professor at Columbia.
Yeah.
And was recently at Virginia
Commonwealth University.
and was also at Harvard, so he knows a little bit about it.
And visiting scholar at Harvard last year. It's a weird situation. I think art education is very important. University programs,